I am West Genret, 32 years old, from Ohio. And the day I found out the truth, the day my heart split in half, started like any other. Ordinary, quiet, cruelly normal. It was a Friday evening. Soft rain tapping against my car windshield as I drove home from work. Humming along to an old love song that used to make him smile. My fiancé, Ethan, had texted me earlier. "Don't bother cooking tonight. I'll take care of dinner." I smiled at my phone back then. I remember that clearly, because that simple text felt like a spark of sweetness in the dull routine we'd fallen into. We'd been distant lately, but I blamed work, stress, life. Never him. Never us. When I pulled up to the house, I saw it immediately. The light spilling through the living room window, flickering gold against the wet glass. I thought he'd lit candles. My heart fluttered. Maybe he was planning a surprise. Maybe he still cared. But then I stepped inside. The smell of wine and perfume hit me. Not mine. Something floral, unfamiliar. I froze in the hallway, hearing the soft sound of laughter from the living room. A woman's laughter. "Ethan?" My voice was barely above a whisper. I turned the corner and saw it. He wasn't alone. She was sitting on our couch, wearing my oversized sweater, the one I'd left on the chair that morning. Her hair was messy, her lipstick smudged. Ethan stood behind her, shirt half-buttoned, holding 2 wine glasses. For a second, time didn't move. The candlelight flickered, his face drained of color, and the world tilted on its axis. "West," he stammered, setting the glasses down. I felt something cold and sharp rise in my chest. "Don't. Just don't." The woman turned. It was Lena, my best friend since college. The betrayal hit harder than any scream could have. My knees weakened, but I didn't fall. I just stared, frozen, as my whole life rewrote itself in front of me. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. Lena stood, trying to speak. "West, it's not what?" My voice cracked but grew louder. "Not what it looks like? Because it looks exactly like what it is." Ethan stepped forward, hands out like he could calm me. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so there was a plan? You scheduled when to destroy me, fiancé?" Only the rain filled the room now, pattering against the windows as if the world outside mourned with me. That night, I didn't cry. Not yet. I packed a small bag, my hands trembling but precise. He tried to stop me, mumbling apologies that meant nothing. I didn't listen. "You said I was your forever," I whispered as I walked out the door. Turns out forever has a checkout time. The sky opened up, rain soaking me as I stood beside my car. My heart wanted to scream, but my pride, my last remaining piece of strength, kept me silent. I drove aimlessly that night, through dark roads and streetlights that blurred into tears I refused to let fall. Every memory we'd made replayed in my mind, cruel and distorted. The laughter, the plans, the promise ring he'd given me in that same living room 2 years ago. By midnight, I ended up outside my parents' old house, the one I hadn't visited in years. I sat in the car until dawn, staring at the house, remembering how I'd always believed love was supposed to be safe. That belief felt childish now. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My phone buzzed nonstop. Ethan, Lena, mutual friends, all wanting to talk. I threw it into the glove compartment. When I finally went inside, my mother looked shocked to see me. "West? Honey, what? I just need to stay here for a bit," I said flatly. She nodded slowly, eyes soft with worry. She didn't press. Mothers never need explanations. They see pain before words catch up. For the next few days, I wandered the house like a ghost. I replayed everything, searching for clues I'd missed. The late nights at work, the change in his cologne, Lena's sudden distance, it was all there. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I remembered the first time I introduced them. Ethan had looked at her a second too long, and she'd smiled a little too warmly. I laughed it off then, believing in trust, in loyalty, in love. Now those memories felt like mockery. On the 5th night, I broke down. I screamed into my pillow, the sound raw and guttural. I threw his hoodie into the trash, then pulled it back out minutes later, sobbing as if I could still smell him there. Heartbreak isn't poetic. It's ugly. It's rage and grief tangled together until you can't breathe. But somewhere in the middle of that chaos, I heard my mother's voice through the door. You'll find yourself again, West. People like them, they break everything they touch. But you build. Her words planted something inside me. Not hope, not yet, but something close. A week later, I drove back to the city. Not to see him. Not to confront them, but to face myself. I parked near the river, watching the water move, endless and steady. I whispered to the reflection staring back at me. You're still here, and they don't get to take that from you. That's when it began. Not the revenge, not yet, but the shift. The quiet decision to rise. Because beneath the heartbreak, beneath the rage, there was still fire. And they had no idea what they'd just awakened. That night, I opened my laptop and created a blank document titled Project Rebirth. At first, it was just a name, something to keep my hands busy while my mind burned. But as I stared at the blinking cursor, an idea began to form, something that would make them see what they'd thrown away. I didn't want to destroy Ethan or Lena. I wanted something better. I wanted them to watch me thrive without them. The best revenge wouldn't be pain. It would be success. And for the first time since that night, I smiled. Not the broken kind, but the kind that promised something fierce. They thought losing them would end me, but they had just given me the reason to begin. The days that followed weren't made of peace. They were made of fragments. Little moments of humiliation that replayed like broken film reels in my head. Every time I stepped outside, I swore people were whispering about me. Mutual friends who once called me family suddenly acted like I was the problem. Like I had somehow caused Ethan and Lena's betrayal myself. That's how injustice works. It doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in slowly, in small cutting ways until it becomes unbearable. The first real sting came a week after I left. I went back to the apartment to pick up the rest of my things. I waited until I thought Ethan wouldn't be home. But when I unlocked the door with my spare key, I froze. There were boxes stacked by the wall, my boxes, labeled in his handwriting, West's stuff. But next to them, where my plants used to be, where our framed photos had hung, everything had been replaced. My things were gone, my memories erased, and there, on the coffee table, sat a framed picture of Ethan and Lena, smiling. It was the same frame we'd used for our first anniversary photo. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stood there, gripping the doorknob until my knuckles went white. That's when I noticed something else, a handwritten note on the counter. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We didn't mean to hurt you. We're happy now. And you deserve to be too. Ethan, those words burned into me like acid. We're happy now. They were happy, and I was supposed to just vanish? I gathered my boxes, left the key on the counter, and walked out. I didn't look back. Later that night, I went to meet some friends from work at a local cafe. I thought a distraction might help, but when I walked in, the air shifted. One of them, Mara, leaned over her cup and said softly, "West, did you know Ethan and Lena are engaged?" I blinked, staring at her. "Engaged? It's all over social media," another said. "He posted a photo yesterday. She's wearing your ring." My stomach dropped. My ring, the one he'd promised me forever with. Everyone fell silent. I excused myself, walked to the restroom, and locked the door. My reflection looked ghostly under the fluorescent lights. He didn't even wait. Not a month. Not even the decency to let the ashes cool before lighting a new fire. That was the first time I felt hate. Not just anger, something deeper, darker. A kind of rage that burns behind your ribs but never escapes your lips. The following days were harder. I couldn't go online without seeing them. Photos, tags, comments from mutuals congratulating the happy couple. Some even joked, "Guess third time's the charm, huh?" Third time. They meant me. And Lena, my former best friend, started a blog about finding unexpected love. Each post was a knife disguised as poetry. Lines like, "Sometimes love finds you when you stop clinging to the wrong person." I knew every word was about me. She used to send me drafts for advice. Now she weaponized them. I went back to work, hoping to bury myself in something, anything, productive. But even there, I couldn't escape the whispers. One of my coworkers leaned across the cubicle one morning. "Hey, I heard Ethan and Lena are doing a joint podcast about relationships. You okay?" I smiled tightly. Yeah, why wouldn't I be? Inside, I was falling apart. Everywhere I turned, their story was being painted as true love overcoming obstacles. And I was the obstacle. The injustice wasn't just what they did. It was how the world sided with them, how people praised their courage to follow their hearts, while mine was left shattered. A few weeks later, I ran into them at the grocery store. Of all the places, it was late, quiet, the aisles half empty. I turned the corner and there they were, laughing near the wine section. Lena saw me first. Her smile faltered. Ethan turned, eyes widening. For a split second, guilt flashed across his face. And then he masked it with fake politeness. "West," he said, voice low, as if my name itself was a scandal. "Didn't expect to see you here?" "I live here," I replied flatly. Didn't realize heartbreak meant relocation. Lena looked uncomfortable. "We hope you're doing okay." "Oh, I'm thriving," I lied. "You know, just living my best single life while you two write Hallmark scripts about betrayal." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You don't have to be bitter about it," I smiled thinly. "You're right. I don't. Because bitterness fades, regret doesn't." And with that, I walked away, leaving them standing in stunned silence. My hands shook as I pushed the cart, but I didn't let them see it. Not anymore. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway, headlights off, rain streaking the windshield again, just like that first night. Only this time I wasn't numb. I was furious at them, furious at myself, furious at how easily people could rewrite your story and call it theirs. I thought back to something my father used to say. Injustice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that convinces everyone else you're wrong. He was right. I had been silenced by whispers. But sitting there in the dark, something began to change. The anger didn't feel destructive anymore. It felt alive. I realized I didn't want to be the victim in their story anymore. I wanted to become the author of mine, and authors. I reminded myself, always get the final word. The next morning, I deleted my social media accounts, every single one. I blocked Ethan, blocked Lena, blocked every mutual who chose gossip over truth. It wasn't about hiding, it was about control. I would decide when they'd hear from me again. And when they did, it wouldn't be whispers. It would be thunder, because I had a plan. I just didn't know it yet. But the seeds were planted that night, buried deep under the soil of my anger. Someday soon, they would grow. And when they did, Ethan and Lena would finally understand what it meant to lose something they could never replace. I didn't notice when my grief turned into anger. It didn't happen in a single explosion. It leaked slowly, drop by drop, until one morning I woke up and felt nothing. No tears, no ache, just fire. I looked at myself in the mirror, my reflection a stranger. My eyes, once soft, were sharp now. My hair was a mess, my skin pale, but behind the exhaustion was something new. Resolve. That was the morning I decided I'd had enough of surviving quietly. Enough of letting them rewrite my story. It started with a message. Ethan had texted me again after weeks of silence. "Hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to check in." I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh escaping. Check in? He'd checked out the moment he chose her. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Over and over, what could I even say? "Hey, thanks for destroying me. Hope your fiancé likes my old couch." Instead, I put the phone down. I wouldn't waste words anymore. That day, I pulled out my old journal, the one I'd used when I first started designing clothes years ago. Sketches, fabric notes, dreams. It was the only piece of me that still felt pure. I flipped through the pages until I found one sketch titled Rebirth, a dress I'd designed years ago but never made. Strong lines, Bold color, power. Looking at it, I whispered, "You're coming back." That's when my mind clicked into motion. I started rebuilding, brick by brick. Every morning, I ran through the streets of my small Ohio neighborhood. At first, it wasn't about fitness, it was survival. My thoughts ran faster than my legs, looping through every memory, every humiliation. The sound of my breath and shoes hitting the pavement drowned them out. Neighbors probably thought I was falling apart. In truth, I was constructing the new version of myself. During the day, I went back to work full-time. I poured every ounce of emotion into my designs. My boss noticed. "You've been on fire lately," she said. "I'm done dimming my light," I replied quietly. She smiled. "That's the spirit." But at night, when the world went quiet, the fire turned painful. I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if Ethan was looking at the same stars with her beside him. That thought used to break me. Now, it fueled me. The breaking point came one weekend, about a month later. I was scrolling through my feed, not my own, but my brand's work account, when I saw it. A photo of Lena wearing one of my designs. The caption read, "A gift from someone who always believed in my vision." Love conquers all, I zoomed in. The stitching was identical to mine. She'd taken my design, modified it slightly, and claimed it as her own. My pulse pounded. She'd stolen my work now, and worse, Ethan had liked the post. That was it. That was the moment my heart snapped in two, not from heartbreak this time, but from sheer rage. I grabbed my sketchbook and slammed it shut. "Enough," I said aloud. My voice echoed through the empty room. I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to rise higher than they could ever dream. They wanted me silent. I'd let my success scream. The next morning, I called my old college mentor, Claire Rivera, a renowned designer who'd once told me I had a spark no one could replicate. When she picked up, her warm voice cracked through my numbness. "West! I haven't heard from you in ages." "Claire," I said, trying to steady my tone. "I need advice. Or maybe a lifeline." She didn't ask why. She just listened as I poured everything out. Ethan, Lena, the betrayal, the theft. When I was done, there was a long pause. Then she said softly, "You've been trying to fight this emotionally. Stop. Fight it creatively." That hit deep. She continued, "Come to New York. I have a small studio you can use. Start again. Channel it all into your art." New York. The city I'd once dreamed of, then abandoned for love. "I don't know if I'm ready," I murmured. "You don't need to be ready," she said. "You just need to begin." That night, I booked a one-way ticket. I told no one. When I packed my bags, I found an old photo of me and Ethan on our first trip together, Niagara Falls, both of us laughing under the spray. I almost tossed it in the trash, but something stopped me. Instead, I took a marker and wrote across it, "Thank you for the lesson." Then I slipped it into my sketchbook, not as a memory. As motivation, my flight left at dawn. The Ohio sky was gray, heavy with rain, as if it were trying to hold me back. I didn't look out the window when we took off. I didn't need to. I knew I was leaving the ashes behind. When the plane landed in New York, the noise, the chaos, the life, it all hit me like oxygen after drowning. Claire met me at her studio, a cozy loft filled with fabrics, sketches, and sunlight. "This is yours," she said, gesturing to a small corner. "Build something that burns." I stood there, inhaling the scent of fabric and determination. "I will," and I meant it. That first week I barely slept. I poured everything into designing a new collection. Every sketch bled emotion. Every cut of fabric was vengeance stitched with elegance. Claire would walk by sometimes, watching quietly. "You're turning pain into power," she said one evening. I smiled faintly. It's all I have left. But the truth was I had more, much more. I had clarity. For the first time, I saw how much I'd given Ethan, my confidence, my creativity, my identity, and how easily he'd taken it. But here, in this city, surrounded by my passion, I was reclaiming it all. I wasn't healing for him. I was evolving without him. One night, after finishing another design, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly, a sea of golden glass. I whispered to myself, "This is what rebirth feels like." And just like that, the broken girl from Ohio died quietly under the New York skyline. In her place, a woman was being born, sharp, resilient, unstoppable, and she was ready for the next step. New York was loud, alive, and merciless. It didn't care that my heart was cracked in places I couldn't name. It didn't care that every night I went home to an empty apartment that echoed with the sound of fabric scissors and quiet tears. By day, I worked relentlessly, fueled by caffeine and pain. By night, I collapsed into silence so thick it pressed against my chest. Isolation was my shadow. It followed me everywhere. The first few months felt like survival disguised as ambition. I had work, yes, but I also had loneliness that clung like fog. I'd moved halfway across the country to start over. Yet I carried every ghost with me. Ethan's voice, Lena's laughter, the version of me that still wanted them to care. Sometimes in the quiet hum of the studio, I'd catch myself whispering his name, not out of longing, but disbelief that he was once mine. Then shame would wash over me, hot and heavy, for letting him still live rent-free in my mind. One evening, I sat at my drafting table surrounded by fabric swatches and unfinished designs. The city buzzed outside, horns, sirens, laughter, while inside my world felt suspended between exhaustion and emptiness. Claire knocked softly on the door before entering. "You haven't eaten today, have you?" I shook my head, eyes fixed on the fabric in front of me. "I'm fine," she sighed. "You're burning too fast, West. Even fire needs oxygen." Her words lingered after she left. Oxygen. That's what I'd forgotten to give myself. A week later, it hit me. The breakdown I'd been avoiding. It was a rainy night, thunder rolling across the city. I'd just gotten news that a brand I admired had rejected my proposal for collaboration. They said my style was too emotional, too raw. I stared at the email until the words blurred. My throat closed, tears burning behind my eyes. Then I lost it. I threw my sketchbook across the room, sending papers scattering like feathers. I screamed into the empty air. What do they want from me? What do they want left of me? No one answered, of course. The only response was thunder outside and the echo of my own despair. I sank to the floor, sobbing until my lungs hurt. All the strength I'd pretended to have melted away, leaving nothing but a woman on the floor of her tiny apartment, clutching pieces of her dream. The next morning, I didn't get up. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow. For the first time since leaving Ohio, I thought about giving up, packing it all, going back home, pretending this chapter never happened. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "I saw your sketch in that online article Claire shared. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Don't let the world harden your heart. Let it shape you." I read it 3 times, and something in me cracked open again. Not from pain this time, but from memory. My mother, who had weathered storms far worse than heartbreak, never stopped believing in love or in me. She always said, "Growth hurts. That's why it's called growing." Maybe this pain wasn't punishment. Maybe it was transformation. The next day, I dragged myself out of bed, showered, and went back to the studio. My hands shook when I picked up the scissors, but I forced myself to work, one cut at a time, one seam at a time. The rhythm returned. The noise in my head quieted. That's when I realized creating wasn't just my career. It was my therapy. I started journaling again too, not about Ethan or Lena, but about myself. About rediscovering what I liked, what I wanted, what I deserved. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt. The loneliness didn't vanish, but it became something I could live with, like an old scar you stop noticing. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I started making connections, small ones at first. A photographer who admired my designs, a model who loved my storytelling approach, a stylist who said my work felt alive. For the first time, I was being seen for who I was, not who I belonged to. But every night, after the studio lights dimmed and the city quieted, the doubt still crept in. The fear that maybe Ethan was right when he said I was too much. That maybe Lena was better at everything, prettier, easier, more likable. One evening, Claire found me staring blankly at a half-finished piece. "What's wrong?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "What if I'm not enough?" She frowned. Not enough for who? The question stunned me. For who? That's when I realized I didn't even know anymore. It took a while, but the answer came one sleepless night while I was sketching. The city outside glowed silver under the rain. My hand moved almost automatically across the page, drawing a figure standing tall in a storm, fabric swirling around her like wings. When I finished, I looked at it and whispered, "Enough for me." The words echoed through the room like a revelation. I didn't need to prove myself to Ethan, to Lena, or to anyone else who doubted me. The only person I owed anything to was the woman staring back from that sketch. A few days later, Claire told me she was entering my latest designs into a prestigious fashion showcase. "Are you serious?" I asked, my eyes wide. She grinned. "I've never been more serious. Your collection deserves to be seen." I wanted to say no, that I wasn't ready, that I couldn't handle another rejection, but something deep inside said, "Say yes." So I did. And from that moment, my struggle took on new meaning. Every late night, every tear, every setback became fuel. Isolation had tested me, but it hadn't broken me. It had taught me to stand alone, and to find strength in that silence. On the night of the showcase, I stood backstage, palms sweaty, heart pounding. Models walked past me in the gowns I'd poured my soul into, vibrant, unapologetic, defiant. As the lights dimmed and the music swelled, I stepped out to take my final bow. For a split second, as the crowd erupted into applause, I imagined Ethan somewhere seeing my name flash across the screen. Not as his ex, not as the woman he betrayed, but as West Genret, the designer who rose from ashes. And in that moment I knew. Isolation hadn't been punishment. It had been preparation. When I first walked off that stage after the showcase, I didn't realize I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. The applause had faded, but something louder was growing inside me. Confidence. A pulse of energy that whispered, "You can do this. You already are." I had tasted recognition. It was small, fleeting, but it was enough to remind me what I was capable of. That night I went home and looked in the mirror again. The same eyes that had once seen only pain now gleamed with fire. I didn't need Ethan's validation anymore. I didn't need anyone's. The following week, I got a call that changed everything. A woman named Vivian Cho, a fashion editor for Modern Vogue, reached out after seeing my work at the showcase. "Your designs have edge," she said. "They're honest, raw. People will relate to that." I almost dropped my phone. "You mean, you want to feature me?" "Not just a feature," Vivian replied. "I want you to collaborate on an editorial spread, The Art of Rising. Think about it." I didn't even need a second. "I'm in." When the call ended, I sat there in stunned silence before laughing. A full, unrestrained laugh that felt like sunlight after years of storm. Working with Vivian was intense. She was sharp, demanding, and brilliant. The kind of woman who turned chaos into art. She saw through me, too. One afternoon, as we worked on fabric layouts, she asked, "Who hurt you?" I froze. "Excuse me?" She smirked slightly. "Pain like yours doesn't come from nowhere. It's in your designs. The way you shape resilience into beauty. It's your signature." I didn't answer, but she didn't press. Instead, she said softly, "Whatever it was, keep using it. Turn it into something the world can't ignore." That became my mantra. Over the next few months, everything accelerated. My designs began attracting attention online, blogs, local boutiques, even influencers requesting custom pieces. I worked 16-hour days, powered by ambition and adrenaline. But unlike before, this work didn't drain me. It built me. Every stitch, every design, every finished piece felt like a declaration. I'm still here. Stronger. Louder. One night, while reviewing sketches, I thought about Ethan. Not in longing, but in clarity. He once said I was too ambitious, that I needed to slow down, be grateful. Now, as I stared at the growing pile of orders and the invitation from Modern Vogue, I smiled. Grateful? I was grateful for the fire he lit when he tried to dim me. Then came the email. It was from Lena. Subject line: "Congratulations, West." I hesitated before opening it. My heart raced, but my fingers moved anyway. "I saw your name everywhere lately. You've done well for yourself, truly. I mean that. Ethan and I were just talking about how proud we are of you." Proud. They were proud. I stared at those words, bile rising in my throat. The nerve, the hypocrisy. Maybe one day we can all move past the awkwardness and meet for coffee. I didn't reply. I deleted it. Then I emptied the trash folder. Some bridges don't need mending. They need to stay burned. That night, I poured every ounce of that fury into my next design. A sleek, midnight blue gown with jagged gold streaks cutting through the fabric, scars turned into style. I called it Phoenix. The day of the Modern Vogue shoot, I arrived early. The studio was buzzing. Models, photographers, stylists. When Vivian walked in, she handed me a coffee and said, "You're the star today, West. Don't hide in the background." For the first time, I didn't. As the cameras flashed and my designs came to life under the lights, I felt something electric. Not pride, but power. Real, tangible power. The kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from reclaiming everything they thought you lost. After the shoot, Vivian pulled me aside. "You know, stories like yours, the ones built from heartbreak, they inspire people." "Maybe," I said, smiling faintly. "But I didn't do it to inspire anyone. I did it to save myself." Vivian nodded. "And that's exactly why it works." When the issue released 2 weeks later, my phone exploded. My inbox flooded with messages, interviews, brand inquiries, collaboration offers. But the one message that stood out came from someone unexpected. Ethan. I saw the article. "You look incredible. I'm proud of you. I didn't realize how much you had in you back then." I stared at the text for a long time. It was exactly the kind of message that once would have shattered me, that would have reopened old wounds. But now, it only made me laugh. I typed a reply, short and sharp. "You never saw me because you never looked." Then I blocked his number. Closure didn't need conversation. It needed boundaries. By summer, my collection Phoenix had become the centerpiece of my first independent show. It was a risk. No safety nets, no guarantees. But I felt unstoppable. The night of the show, as the first model stepped onto the runway draped in gold and blue light, a hush fell over the audience. I stood backstage, trembling, but not from fear. From the realization that every step of pain had led me here. When the final model walked and the crowd rose to their feet, I felt tears fill my eyes. Not sad tears, powerful ones. The applause wasn't just for the clothes, it was for survival. After the show, as the crowd thinned, Claire approached me with a proud smile. "You did it," she said. I shook my head softly. "No, we did it. You gave me the space to rebuild." She hugged me tightly. "And you turned that space into a kingdom." Later that night, alone in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and looked out over the city. Lights flickered below, like stars caught in glass towers. I thought about the woman I'd been, crying in her car under the rain, begging the universe for mercy. And then I thought about the woman I was now, bold, self-made, and unshakably whole. I whispered to myself, "This is what power feels like." And for the first time, it didn't scare me. After the Phoenix show, everything around me felt electric. The applause still echoed in my memory, the smell of fresh fabric and camera flashes still vivid in my senses. But after the noise faded, I realized something. I wasn't done. I had built myself back up, yes, but I hadn't yet reclaimed what was taken. They had stolen my peace, my trust, my voice, and now it was time to take them back. One evening, I was reviewing offers that had come in after the show when I noticed something strange. A boutique owner named Maya Lynn had reached out, mentioning that Lena had tried to sell my old sketches to her under a different label. My stomach dropped. Those sketches were from before New York, designs I'd left behind when I fled Ohio. She said they were hers, Maya told me over the phone, her tone apologetic. but I recognized your name from Modern Vogue. I thought something was off. That was all it took to light the fuse again. They hadn't just betrayed me personally. They were now trying to profit off my work. I didn't tell Claire or Vivian, not yet. I wanted to handle this myself, quietly, strategically. Revenge, I was learning, didn't have to be loud. It just had to be undeniable. I began researching Lena's so-called brand. She had started a small online boutique, Ethereal Threads, run out of her apartment. The photos on the site made my blood boil. There, in perfect lighting, were my old designs. My fabric patterns, even my color palette. She had rebranded them under her name, claiming they were inspired by emotional recovery. How poetic. The site wasn't big yet, but I knew exactly how to make sure it would be, just not in the way she wanted. Step 1. Documentation. I took screenshots of everything, dates, posts, listings. I still had my original sketches with timestamps from years ago. Proof. All of it. Then I contacted a lawyer, a woman named Amara Collins, who specialized in creative copyright. I told her everything. She listened silently, then smiled. They underestimated you, didn't they? They always do, I said. Amara leaned forward. We'll take care of this legally, but you should also prepare something public. Not scandalous, strategic. Let your success tell the story before they ever open their mouths. I liked the sound of that. For the next 2 months, I worked in silence, building my next collection behind closed doors. It was unlike anything I'd ever done. Bolder, rawer. I called it Eclipse. The theme was transformation, shadows giving way to light. Every piece symbolized a phase of healing. The final design, a shimmering silver gown, represented the moment the moon steps out of darkness. I poured myself into it. Every ounce of pain, every drop of power. At the same time, Amara sent legal notices to Lena, demanding immediate removal of all plagiarized designs. But instead of complying quietly, Lena did what I should have expected. She went public. She posted a long, dramatic message online. I can't believe someone I once called a friend is trying to destroy my business. Creativity can't be copyrighted. Inspiration comes from everywhere. The post went viral overnight. People took sides, some defending her, others tagging me in solidarity. I didn't reply. Not once. Silence was my weapon now. The more she spoke, the more desperate she sounded. The world didn't know it yet, but I was preparing something that would end the conversation entirely. A week later, I received an invitation from Modern Vogue to headline their Winter Fashion Gala. It was one of the biggest events in the industry, televised, attended by every major designer, influencer, and critic. That was it. That was my stage. I decided right then. Eclipse would debut there, and Lena would be in the audience. The weeks leading up to the gala were a blur of chaos. Models rehearsed under bright lights while seamstresses worked late into the night. Claire kept checking in, sensing the storm building behind my calm. West, she said one night, are you sure you're doing this for the right reason? I looked at her, unflinching. I'm doing it for every wrong reason that made me strong. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then make sure it's worth it. It will be, I said. The night of the gala arrived cold and glittering. Snow drifted outside the grand glass venue as I stood backstage, the eclipse gowns lined in perfect order behind me. Reporters swarmed the red carpet, cameras flashing like lightning. Through a gap in the curtain, I saw her, Lena, walking in on Ethan's arm. He looked older, tired even, but she glowed with the smugness of someone who thought she'd already won. They didn't see me. But I saw them, and for the first time I felt no hatred, just anticipation. When the show began, the lights dimmed to darkness. A single note of music filled the air, a haunting piano melody that slowly swelled as the first model stepped onto the runway. The crowd gasped. The design shimmered like liquid light, fabrics that moved like water, colors that bled into one another like twilight. Each gown told a story: despair, survival, rebirth. By the time the final model appeared wearing the silver gown, the eclipse dress, the room was silent. It wasn't applause that followed. It was awe. Then the music cut. The lights flared, and on the massive screen behind the runway, my name appeared. West Genret. Eclipse. A journey from betrayal to brilliance. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. But my eyes went straight to her. Lena sat frozen in the audience, Ethan beside her, their smiles gone. It was over. After the show, Vivian approached me with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just design clothes tonight, West. You told every woman's story." I smiled, my chest swelling. "No," I said quietly. "I told mine." Later, as I walked through the backstage chaos, my phone buzzed. A new message from Amara. "Congratulations." "They've officially taken down their website. Settlement pending," I exhaled, relief flooding through me. Not because I'd beaten them, because I'd finally closed the chapter on them. That night, as I stood on the balcony of my hotel room overlooking the city lights, I whispered to myself, this was never about revenge. It was about remembrance. I had remembered who I was, what I was capable of, and for the first time in years, I felt whole again. But deep down I knew, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. Because power isn't something you take back once. It's something you carry forward, forever. The morning after the eclipse show, the world seemed to hum differently. Every ping on my phone, every message, every mention of my name online felt like waves crashing against the shore of a new beginning. My story had spread. Not just the fashion, but the emotion behind it. Interviews, collaborations, magazine covers. Everything I had once dreamed of was unfolding faster than I could process. But the real satisfaction didn't come from fame. It came from watching the people who had broken me finally face what they had done. 2 days after the show, my lawyer Amara called. "They settled," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Lena's company is officially dissolved. The payout and full credit transfer will be signed by Friday. They're also required to make a public apology." I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of my desk. "So it's done?" "It's done," she confirmed. "But West, the statement has to come from you too. You can either issue a simple press note or..." She paused. "You can do it your way." I smiled, already knowing which option I'd choose. "My way." The press release came out 2 days later. Designer West Genret accuses former acquaintance Lena of plagiarism. Legal settlement reached. Exclusive interview airing on Vogue channel this Friday. It was everywhere. Twitter threads dissected the drama. Blogs analyzed my designs next to hers, showing undeniable proof. Comment sections filled with words like karma and justice. For once, the narrative wasn't being twisted against me. This time, the truth was mine to tell. The Vogue interview aired in a softly lit studio, the air thick with anticipation. Vivian sat across from me, her voice calm but probing. "West, your collection Eclipse was called one of the most emotional showcases of the decade. Tell us, what inspired it?" I looked straight into the camera. "Pain," I said simply. "Pain that turned into purpose. And betrayal that taught me to rebuild." She nodded slowly. "And the plagiarism scandal?" I didn't flinch. When people steal your work, they think they're taking your power. But creativity doesn't come from theft. It comes from surviving. And I survived. The silence after my words was deafening. Then Vivian leaned in slightly, eyes glinting. "Do you forgive them?" I thought about it. About Lena's smug smile, Ethan's empty apologies, all the nights I spent drowning in doubt. "No," I said finally. "But I'm done needing to." By the next morning, the clip had gone viral. Every outlet replayed my interview. The internet was merciless, dragging Lena and Ethan's names through the mud. But I didn't feel vengeful watching it. I felt free. Lena tried to post a response video, tears streaking her face, claiming she was misunderstood. It only made things worse. The world had already chosen its side. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed silent. The man who had once been loud with arrogance had vanished from social media entirely. And I kept creating. A month later, I received an invitation to the Global Fashion Excellence Awards. My name was nominated under Designer of the Year. It was surreal, to go from heartbreak to this. Claire and Vivian insisted we make a night of it. "This is your victory lap," Vivian said, fastening the diamond clasp on my silver gown backstage. "Own it." When my name was announced, I froze. For a heartbeat, everything went quiet. Just the sound of my own breath, trembling. Then applause. Thunderous, endless applause. I walked onto the stage, lights blinding, emotions swelling. Holding the golden award in my hands felt symbolic. Not just for fashion, but for survival itself. I took the microphone and said, "They said pain makes you fragile. I learned it makes you unforgettable," the audience erupted. After the ceremony, as I was leaving, a man approached me. I recognized him instantly. Ethan. He looked older, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. His suit was immaculate, but the confidence that once defined him was gone. "West," he said softly, almost pleading. "Can we talk?" I turned slowly. "About what?" "How you and Lena built a business on lies." He sighed, eyes glassy. "I made mistakes. I let her influence me. I thought you'd be fine without me. Stronger, even. I didn't realize how much I cut him off. "Don't. You don't get to rewrite the story now." He nodded slowly, shame creeping up his face. "You've changed," I smiled faintly. "No. I just stopped letting you define me." And with that, I walked away. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. The following week, Eclipse was officially sold out worldwide. My name became a symbol of resilience, of rebirth. Magazines wrote about me, not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who built an empire from it. One afternoon, while packing up sketches for my next collection, I found an old photo, me, Ethan, and Lena, all smiles. I looked at it for a long moment before tearing it clean down the middle and dropping it in the trash. Some memories deserve to stay broken. As months passed, new opportunities blossomed. A mentorship program for young designers, a collaboration with Paris Fashion Week, even a brand campaign about women rising from adversity. But the best moment came quietly. A young designer messaged me on Instagram. "Your story saved me." I was about to quit after my boss stole my work. Then I watched your interview. Now I'm fighting back. I read it 3 times, tears welling in my eyes. That's when I realized the full circle moment. My pain had turned into someone else's hope. And that was the real strike. The night I launched my new line, Dawn, I stood backstage again, the same place where my journey had fallen apart years ago. But this time my reflection didn't look tired or lost. It looked like a woman who had taken every betrayal and built a throne from it. Claire came up beside me, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To moving on," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, to striking back without even lifting a hand. As the lights dimmed and the crowd roared, I whispered to myself, "They said I'd never recover." They were right. I didn't recover. I reinvented. And with that, the curtain rose again. The days after the Vogue interview were a blur of headlines, emails, and flashing lights. I was everywhere. My name, my story, my designs. But fame didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like closure finally echoing through the world. People weren't talking about Ethan and Lena's betrayal anymore. They were talking about my rise, my voice, my strength, my art. Still, deep inside, I knew the reckoning wasn't over. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about truth finding its way into every corner that had once hidden my pain. When the Global Fashion Excellence Awards replay aired across networks, the reaction was massive. Overnight, my following tripled. People quoted my acceptance speech. "Pain doesn't make you fragile. It makes you unforgettable." I received letters. Thousands of them. From strangers around the world who saw their own reflection in my words. Women, men, even teenagers who had been belittled, betrayed, or silenced. But one message stood out. It wasn't a fan letter. It was from Lena. "West, I know you probably hate me. I deserve that. But please, can we talk? Just once? I need to explain." I stared at the message for a long while. A year ago, I would have read it 10 times, searching for meaning, craving closure. Now it felt irrelevant. Still, curiosity tugged at me, not out of forgiveness, but to witness her downfall face to face. So, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe in Soho, the same cafe where Ethan once laughed at my dreams. Fitting. When I walked in, she looked small. Her hair was messy, makeup smeared, clothes too expensive for the sadness she carried. "West," she said, standing up quickly, hands trembling. "You look successful?" I cut in, sitting down opposite her, her face flushed. I deserved that, more than you know. For a few seconds, we just sat there in silence, the hum of the cafe filling the space between us. "Finally," she whispered. I didn't mean for things to go that far. Ethan and we were stupid, but I was jealous. You were everything I wanted to be. Brave, talented, loved. Loved? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You mean by him? The same man who used both of us. Tears welled in her eyes. He left me, right after the settlement, said I ruined his life. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, I didn't see my enemy. I saw a reflection of who I could have been if I'd stayed broken. "Lena," I said quietly, "you didn't ruin his life. He did that himself. And as for mine, you just made it worth fighting for." She started crying, covering her face with shaking hands. I didn't comfort her, not out of cruelty, but because her pain wasn't my responsibility anymore. Before I left, I said, "You wanted to be me. But you forgot one thing. You can't steal strength. You have to earn it." I walked out without looking back. That was the last time I ever saw her. The months after that were monumental. I launched my global brand, W by West Genret, partnering with international fashion houses. The collection sold out within hours of every release. My story was featured in documentaries and news, specials about resilience and empowerment. But the real turning point came when Vogue International invited me to speak at their Women Who Rebuilt themselves summit in London. I didn't hesitate. The auditorium was packed, hundreds of women from all over the world, each carrying their own story. When I stepped on stage, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I told them everything. Not just about betrayal or fashion, but about what it means to lose yourself completely and still find the courage to rebuild. "When people break you," I said, my voice steady, "they don't destroy you. They hand you the pieces to rebuild something they can never touch again." The crowd rose to their feet. Some clapped. Some cried. In that moment, I realized my revenge had turned into something much greater. A revolution. After the summit, I was approached by a young woman named Isla, barely 21, trembling as she spoke. "You don't know what you've done for me," she said. "My boss stole my designs and took all the credit. I was going to quit, but when I heard your story, I decided to start my own label," I hugged her. "Then you've already won," I whispered. That night I cried, not out of sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling that everything had come full circle. My pain had become a map for someone else's healing. A few months later, I received an invitation to return to my hometown. A local art foundation wanted to name their new creative wing after me. The West Genret Center for Aspiring Designers. I hesitated. Going back meant facing ghosts. The streets, the memories, even my family who once doubted every dream I had. But something inside me said it was time. When I arrived, the town looked smaller. Familiar, yet distant. The air smelled the same, salt and rain and memory. At the ceremony, my parents stood in the crowd, eyes glistening with pride. My mother whispered through tears, "We were wrong about you." I smiled softly. "You just didn't see me yet." After the unveiling, as cameras flashed and applause filled the hall, I looked up at the sign with my name etched in gold. West Genret Center, it wasn't vanity I felt. It was peace. Later that evening, I visited the small cafe where I used to sketch designs on napkins. The waitress, who had served me years ago, recognized me immediately. "You came back," she said, smiling. I nodded, sitting by the window. I had to remember what started it all. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, familiar. I opened my sketchbook, the one I always carried, and began to draw. But this time, the lines weren't sharp with anger or sorrow. They flowed freely, effortless, bright, alive. That's when I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't about destroying anyone. It was about rebuilding yourself so powerfully that the world couldn't deny your worth again. When I left the cafe, I didn't look back. The girl who had once been broken in that town was gone. In her place stood a woman who had turned pain into art, betrayal into brilliance, and silence into an anthem. And for the first time I knew the reckoning was complete. The morning after the dedication ceremony, I woke up to sunlight spilling through sheer curtains, the sound of waves crashing gently in the distance. It was one of those rare mornings when everything was still, when my mind wasn't racing with deadlines or memories. I sat by the window of my hotel room, coffee in hand, watching the horizon blur between sea and sky. For the first time in years, my heart didn't ache. It didn't burn with anger or pulse with the need to prove something. It just existed, calm, steady, whole. This was the peace I had chased for so long, the kind you can't buy or beg for. The kind you earn, through pain, through fire, through every step it takes to become someone you're proud of. When I returned to New York, my studio felt different. The same space, same energy, but lighter somehow. The air wasn't heavy with pressure anymore. Instead of trying to run from my past, I had turned it into art, into power, into purpose. The walls were covered with sketches, new designs bursting with color and optimism. The collection I was working on now was nothing like Eclipse. It wasn't about pain anymore. It was about the aftermath. What comes after survival? I named it Serenity. Claire noticed the change too. One afternoon, she walked in holding 2 cups of tea, her eyes sweeping across the sketches. "You've softened," she said gently, handing me a cup. I smiled. "I've grown," she nodded slowly. "You know, I was scared for you for a while. I thought revenge would swallow you whole, but you turned it into art instead." "That's the thing about pain," I said, sipping the tea. "If you carry it long enough, it either destroys you or shapes you." I decided to let it shape me. Claire smiled proudly. "And you did. You turned it into gold." Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm I'd never known before. Peaceful, creative, meaningful. I started volunteering at local art programs, mentoring young designers from disadvantaged backgrounds. Every time one of them showed me a design full of hope and fire, I saw a piece of my younger self, the girl who once sketched on napkins and believed in impossible dreams. One of them, a quiet girl named Nia, asked me one day, "Miss Genret, how did you know when you were finally over it? The people who hurt you?" I thought for a moment. "When I stopped needing them to see it," I said softly. "When I realized my healing didn't need their apology." Her eyes widened, and she nodded like she was storing the words for later. I understood. That was exactly what I had once needed to hear too. A few months later, I received an email that stopped me cold. It was from Ethan. "West, I saw your recent campaign. You're incredible. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that you changed me. I'm sorry, truly. I've lost everything. But maybe I finally found the truth." I stared at the message for a long time. Once upon a time, those words would have been everything I'd wanted. But now they were nothing. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, out of understanding. Some stories aren't meant to be reopened. I closed the email and smiled faintly to myself. "Good," I whispered. "Now you finally know what loss feels like." As spring bloomed in the city, Serenity launched quietly but beautifully. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a celebration. Soft fabrics, gentle tones, flowing lines. It was the story of letting go stitched into every seam. During the runway show, the audience wasn't silent in awe this time. They smiled, they breathed, they connected. The energy was calm, healing. I could feel it. The transformation not just in the clothes, but in myself. When the final model walked out in a gown the color of sunrise, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was rebirth. After the show, Vivian hugged me tightly. "You've done it again," she whispered. I smiled, eyes misting. "No, Vivian, we did it. And this time it wasn't to prove anything. It was just to live." That night, after the after party ended, I found myself walking alone through the quiet streets of Manhattan. The city that had once felt too big, too cruel, now felt like home. I passed by a billboard, my own face smiling back at me. Under the words, West Genret, the woman who rose from ruins to rewrite fashion history. It should have felt triumphant. But what I felt instead was gratitude. Gratitude for every scar, every sleepless night, every betrayal that had pushed me to become this version of myself. Without them, I wouldn't have built the strength to stand here now. When I got home, I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a soft blanket, the city lights shimmering below like a field of stars. I opened my journal and wrote the final chapter of my story, not for the world, but for me. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for me, to let go of the weight they left behind. I've learned that healing isn't loud or glamorous. It's quiet, steady, like the dawn after a storm. I am no longer the woman who needed revenge. I am the woman who found peace. I closed the journal and leaned back, smiling. For once, there was no ache, no longing, just stillness. A few weeks later, I was invited to give a commencement speech at a major design school. Standing before hundreds of graduates, I realized the journey had come full circle. I told them, success isn't about who you outshine. It's about who you become when the lights go out. Remember, they may doubt you, betray you, even break you. But one day, they'll have to watch you become everything they said you couldn't. The crowd erupted in applause. And for a brief moment, I saw my younger self sitting among them, hopeful, fearless, ready. When I returned home that evening, the sky was painted in hues of pink and gold. I stood by the window again, watching the sunset fade into twilight, and whispered to myself, I made it. Because I had. Not just to success, but to peace. Not to revenge, but to rebirth. The air outside smelled like rain again. Soft, clean, familiar. I stood at my studio window, watching droplets slide down the glass, each one catching the reflection of city lights below. It reminded me of everything I had survived. The betrayals, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights that once felt endless. But this time the rain didn't feel heavy. It felt like a baptism, a washing away of everything I no longer needed to carry. It had been a year since the Serenity launch, and life had settled into a rhythm of quiet success. My name wasn't trending every week anymore, but that was fine. I didn't need the noise. What mattered now was peace. What mattered was purpose. That morning, I had a meeting with the creative directors of my mentorship foundation, the West Genret Collective. We gathered around a long oak table in my office. Sketches and portfolios spread everywhere. These weren't just employees. They were dreamers, artists, survivors like me. Nia, the young designer I'd once mentored, presented her debut line, bold, elegant, unapologetic. When she finished, I found myself tearing up. You did it, I told her softly. She grinned, her eyes shining. I learned from the best. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The real legacy of revenge wasn't triumph over enemies. It was transformation of others. The fire I'd once used to burn bridges was now lighting new paths for people like her. Later that day, I took a walk through Central Park. The trees were golden with autumn, leaves swirling in the air like soft confetti. Couples laughed. Children ran. A street performer sang an old love song. I stopped for a moment, closing my eyes and letting the music sink in. For the first time in years, I didn't think of Ethan, or Lena, or anyone who had hurt me. They weren't ghosts haunting my story anymore. They were simply footnotes in a much larger book. I sat on a park bench and pulled out my sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. I started to draw, not gowns, not patterns, but wings. Soft, expansive wings, stretching free from the edges of the page. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. That evening, I got a call from Vivian. West, they're doing a feature on you, she said excitedly. Forbes Women of Influence. They want to film at your studio next week. I laughed. Do people ever get tired of hearing about me? Not when your story keeps inspiring them, she said. You gave people hope, West. You gave them courage. Her words warmed me. A few years ago, I wouldn't have believed I could inspire anyone. I was too consumed by proving my worth, too busy turning pain into armor. Now I understood that the most powerful thing a woman could do wasn't to fight, it was to heal out loud. The documentary filming was surreal. Cameras followed me around the studio as I guided students, reviewed designs, and laughed with my team. The director asked thoughtful questions, but one in particular stayed with me. If you could go back and change anything, would you? I paused, looking around the room. The sketches, the awards, the faces of people I loved. No, I said finally. Because if I hadn't been broken, I would never have learned how to build. Pain was my teacher. It taught me who I was, who I wasn't, and who I was meant to become. The director smiled quietly. That's powerful. It's truth, I said simply. When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in again, but this time they weren't about sympathy or outrage. They were about gratitude. People wrote things like, "You made me believe I can start over. Your story gave me strength to leave my toxic job. Because of you, I'm chasing my dream again." Reading them, I realized my revenge had become something divine, not destruction, but creation. A month later, I traveled back to Ohio for a small charity gala hosted in my honor. My parents were there again, standing beside me, beaming. The woman who once doubted me now wore my designs proudly. My father held my hand and whispered, "You did it, kiddo." I smiled. We did. After the event, I stayed behind, wandering through the quiet streets of my hometown. The air was cool, filled with nostalgia. I passed the old cafe where it had all begun, the same one where I'd once sat with Ethan, believing he'd be my forever. I stepped inside. The same waitress was there, older now, but still kind. "Back again?" she asked. "Yeah," I said softly. "One last time." I ordered my usual black coffee, 2 sugars, and sat by the window where I'd once cried over shattered dreams. Now I sipped in silence, smiling at the memory. It no longer hurt. It just existed. Part of me, but not my whole story. Before I left, I took a napkin and scribbled a note. "Thank you for the coffee, and for always keeping the lights on for dreamers like me." I left a generous tip and walked out into the cool night. Back in New York, a few weeks later, I stood backstage at another show, not mine this time, but Naya's. She was debuting her first collection, and I was there purely as support. Watching her designs glide across the runway, I felt proud beyond words. This was the future I had built. When the show ended, she came running to me, hugging me tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you. You didn't need me," I said, smiling. "You just needed someone to remind you who you are." And with that, I passed her my bracelet, a small silver charm shaped like a phoenix. "It's yours now," I said. "Keep rising." That night, as I walked home under a sky filled with stars, I realized my story had come full circle. The girl who once fell apart in the dark had become the woman who helped others find their light. Revenge had never been about hurting them. It had been about loving myself enough to rebuild, to rise, to soar. I turned one last time to look at the city that had witnessed it all. The heartbreak, the rise, the redemption, and whispered, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do." And as the night breeze carried my words away, I smiled, a real, unguarded smile. My story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about becoming, about taking the ashes and painting them gold. And if my story resonated with you, I said softly to the camera crew filming the final scene, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Then, after a long pause, I added my final truth, because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right. She turned toward the horizon. Calm, radiant, free.